on the phone with us this morning on a Tuesday, and we are glad that he is Chris Cargill.
Chris Cargill.
Eastern Washington Director, Washington Policy Center.
That's
Chris,
right.
good morning, sir.
That's ever been described.
How are you?
I'm good.
Hey, Chris.
I was a little under the weather last week. I apologize for missing our phone call, but I'm back and better than ever.
Did you get the flowers we sent?
No, I didn't. I think they were sent to the wrong house.
Dang it. That happens a lot. Oh, well, we'll next time
All
you're
right.
out, we'll hook you up. So, as I was reading over the note that you always send us to remind us to call, I see that we've got 2.6 billion more reasons for the state to cut taxes. Are we, how would we be doing had there not been a pandemic?
Well, good question. I mean, I think that's an excellent question. I mean, we got the quarterly revenue forecast just in the past 10 days or so, and it showed another huge increase in tax revenue. In fact, as we just mentioned, 2.6 billion more than was previously expected when lawmakers just wrote the budget a few months ago. And so, we really believe that the state has 2.6 billion reasons more to actually provide some broad-based tax relief. Unfortunately, as we saw in the legislative session, the state was busy imposing an income tax this year. Now, it starts with capital gains, but lawmakers in other states were actually busy providing significant tax relief. I mean, if you look at California, they provided what's called the Golden State Stimulus a check account policy that they passed, which accounts to about $12 billion in total. That's the largest state tax rebate that we've ever had in American history. And that's California. I mean, it's not like California is a really conservative state. Oregon did something similar with a $1.4 billion rebate. Idaho had the single largest tax cut in state history. And so we've seen other states come in and say, you know what, we're going to provide some tax relief. Washington State seems to be going in the opposite direction and saying, no, we're going to increase taxes even though we have plenty of money to work with for the next budget cycle, as we've talked about with the revenue forecast. So it was really disappointing. We're hoping that lawmakers will come back in here maybe in a special session or next January and provide some tax relief, because I think the question is, if you don't do it now, are you ever going to do it when you have all this extra cash coming in?
And the answer is no, right? I mean,
we'll see. I mean, when you have a Seattle delegation essentially leading the legislature, it's hard to convince them to do it, and that is unfortunate. But I think what's really even more outrageous is not necessarily not providing tax relief, but then increasing taxes as well in the middle of a pandemic, and in the middle of a government-imposed economic shutdown. So it's one thing to not provide taxes; it's quite another to go ahead and decide to increase those taxes in the middle of this economic climate.
Don't get that. Just don't get that.
That's the question. It isn't even so much as that we're doing it in this climate. It's like, in this climate, where the hell is this extra money coming from?
Yeah, I mean, I think the people of the state are pretty resilient, and I think the other part of this is, and some other states have seen their tax revenues go down, because we have such a broad base of tax revenues. We have the sales tax, the property tax, and we don't rely on the income tax, at least not right now. We don't see as big of a swing as other states might see. And when many people got laid off, they still had to go out and buy things, and they still paid their property taxes, and so the revenue was still there. Whereas if we would have relied solely or mainly on income taxes, we probably would have been hurting.
Well, and is there a vote anywhere that maybe we got lousy forecasters?
Well, yes, I think that's another good question, and something to consider in the future is whether our forecasters are not necessarily forecasting the right thing. I mean, if we provided some tax relief, let's say we reduced the state sales tax by 0.1%. So instead of it being 6%, it goes down to 5.9. Let's just say, that's one of the arguments that we could have. That would provide $306 million in tax relief to the citizens of the state. So you could probably reduce it by 0.5% and still have money left over from this $2.6 billion increase in revenue.
Makes sense to me, Chris Cargill. I don't know why we wouldn't do it. I mean, the people got us there. Why not give them a bit of a respite? And if, heaven forbid, down the road you got to grab it back, then you can do that. But as long as the other money is available, can we not at least show some consideration and respect for the taxpayers of the state?
Yeah, I agree. I think I just said state rate is 6%. It's actually 6.5%. So if we reduced it to 6%, we'd still have money left over.
So why are they taking these actions? Why do you think they're doing this? If we all can sit here and go, well wait a minute. If everyone's asking the question, if everyone sees the extra revenue, what, in your opinion, why are they doing this?
Well, unfortunately, I think there's a state of mind by many politicians and folks in Olympia that money doesn't belong to the citizens. It belongs to them. So they can spend it how they want to spend it. And I think, unfortunately, that is an outrageous point of view, but it's something that far too many legislators and politicians believe, that it is government money and not the citizens' money. Really, I mean, when you look at other policies in other states, they push things like a taxpayer bill of rights or things like that. And part of that taxpayer bill of rights requires the government to return, if you've got all this extra cash, requires the government to return that back to taxpayers in the form of a rebate or a reduction in some other sort of taxes. Unfortunately, we don't have a taxpayer bill of rights here in Washington State, and I think it's something we should seriously consider in the future.
Boy, that's right.
Let me ask you this. What percentage, you don't have to know or get it right, but just out of curiosity, would you say, what percentage of our legislators are on their, let's say, fourth term in House of Representatives?
I would say probably in both chambers there's at least a quarter. That's just a guess. I'd have to go back and do the research on it. But I would guess about a quarter of each legislative body has served at least 4 terms.
Yeah,
now, again, that's a guess. I'd have to double check.
Sure. I just, my gut tells me it's higher than that, but because it's only 2 years at a shot for the House, so that's 8 years. And my point being is, I think you reach the point of that it's the state's money, not yours, when you've been there too damn long. And I think that represents term limit thinking. When we see people lose touch of where that money comes from and whose money it really is, then I think it's time to go back and have to try to make some of it the hard way, and then see how you think. Refresh your memory banks.
Well, I think that's a good point. I also think that attitude sometimes persists in local government as well. When you talk about, for instance, the American Rescue Plan, the federal government stimulus funds that are being handed out, and you have a lot of local government officials and state officials saying, ooh, how can we best spend this money? How can we best spend this free money that we're getting? Well, it's not free money. Just because it comes from the federal government does not mean it's free money. It's coming from taxpayers. And so there was a judge in, I think it was Ohio last week, that ruled that local governments, municipalities, states, can use that money for tax relief, even though there were some people who thought that wasn't possible. But yes, indeed, you can use that money for tax relief, which I think a lot of local governments in the state should consider.
Yeah, absolutely. Give a one-time property tax break or whatever divides up the money that need not be spent on extravagance other than the basics. So it just, you and I need to, you, me, Lance, and Jack, the fearsome foursome, we need to all come and show Liberty how to run its city council, I think. You're already there. You save us a couple spots. We're coming, and we'll be a model project for the rest of the nation.
Right.
What do you say?
I got that.
Are you in?
That sounds good to me.
Hey, Chris, before you leave, one last thing. Boy, this is all about power, and the governor retains his emergency powers, right? So, are we ever going to see those dropped, or any effort to get those dropped, or is he going to hang on? What's the scoop?
You know, the answer is yes, because he just, and we'll talk a little bit more about this next week as well.
Okay.
But basically, the emergency has not necessarily ended, but the economic restrictions are easing now in the state. And unfortunately, I think what that's going to mean is that there's little to no focus in the future on whether the legislature should step in and limit a governor's emergency powers. And if you don't think that this is going to happen again in the future, where you have a future governor, whether it be Inslee or not, coming in and saying, hey, it's an emergency for this and an emergency for that, and I'm going to have unlimited power. If you don't think that's going to happen again in the future, I've got a bridge to sell you, bud, somewhere.